where we get this. His allies proposed no debate or petitions about slavery at all in Congress. By the way, this is blatantly anti-constitutional. But he wanted this rule. And basically it turned to, it's called a litmus test. A litmus test is basically saying that if you're a true Southerner, regardless of your party, you will vote to gag free speech on the floor of the United States Congress. Well, what he's trying to do, he's trying to force Southerners, regardless of party, to prove they're really pro-slavery. And this will go on for nearly a decade. Can you imagine in the House and the Senate not being able to talk about one of the most important issues in the country?
Wait, so did it?
A litmus test is another term for, it's a scientific test. For a test, basically, you ever seen a test where you have like a big blood or anything, but they dip something in and you can tell, like a draw test? That's called a litmus test. So this is a litmus test for Southerners. To prove you're to pass it, you must prove you're a real Southerner. And yes, for a decade, they could not debate slavery on the floor of the United States Congress, House or Senate. They couldn't accept petitions. They'd throw them away. It's really hard to because you need a case. There's not a case. It's really hard for Congress. And at the same time, the United States Mail began to censor abolitionist material. Abolitionist was what? The first major anti-slavery newspaper, we'll get to a little bit, called The Liberator, we'll get to it down the road. So they censored that because the fear was, and it fit right in with this. Same deal, you better prove you're pro-South and want to censor the Mail. They said abolitionist material would trigger a what? The slave rebellions. And Jackson's Postal Service said this. Jackson, yes, he believed in equality for white men. He still, too, was a slaveholder. Whatever. Pretty interesting time. You start thinking about all the different contradictions. And one more thing's going on during this time. It fits in with capitalism, but it also fits in with Jacksonian economics, the growth of labor unions. So you have labor unions who feared that wage system. What decides wages in capitalism? And then that machines became more important than people. Machines wasn't another name for machines. Yeah, that's capital. And working conditions were horrific, dangerous, deadly. And the reason why was simple. There is a financial incentive for employers to have dangerous working conditions. They get a competitive advantage the more dangerous their working conditions are. It's the paradox of this. Because do you remember when I was talking about capitalism? And I said that the capitalists, when they start a business, they want to make money. And the big money is what? Or the big symbol of money, what says it is, the difference between revenues, the amount of money you get in from the sale of your goods or service, and your cost. What is that difference? What is that called? That's the profit margin. Profit margin. Which one can the employer control? Unless he has a monopoly, we're talking about now a competitive market. What's that? Yeah. The price is set by the market, but they can control costs. To make a workplace safe costs money. To protect machinery that's out in the open, or give protective gear in, let's say, a steel or iron mill, very expensive. To slow production down so it's less dangerous, so more accidents, or to stop accidents, expensive. It's a cost. So there's a financial incentive to have a dangerous working place. Did you catch that? It gives you a competitive advantage. Yeah.
Wouldn't it be bad if you have you lose like employees?
Potentially, yeah, sure. At a time of a time of low unemployment, so there's not many workers out there, sure.
Oh, but it's
High unemployment, or if there's a lot of immigrants coming in.
right, so it didn't matter because you can go outside, you go and
And tell your workers, you complain, I got 20 people out there want a job. Keep complaining. And one more thing about this then. If there's an incentive to actually make the workplace unsafe? Let's say you do decide, I'm gonna, have all these whirling parts. Like, remember the textile one that told you how that thread moving, you lose a finger? Let's say we slow it down and then cover that so it's safer. You pay a cost. What's your competitor doing?
Just running it.
Yeah. And they undermine you and drive you out of business. So, I guess it's only business. There's a morality issue there. Have you heard that? It's only business. Kind of, I can do whatever I want, it's just business. Wow. So, unions begin to form because of these big reasons. And the idea is, when it comes right down to it, all this is said and done, control of your life. Who has control? If I got to work in this unsafe working conditions just because I have no money to feed my family, remember, the consumer economy, you need a job. Don't feel like you have control. So first off, economies of scale. Do you remember what that is? Who has a competitive advantage? So think about, let's say you work, don't think about like if you have like 2 employees and 1 boss. Everybody knows each other, that's different. But more and more you're getting these big workplaces where they might have 100 workers or 1,000 workers. You start getting there, the owners of the company have no idea who their employees are. They don't know their name, they don't know them at all. Well, and just imagine if you're in unsafe working conditions, low wages, you come in and say, just go home. I can't take it anymore. I demand safer conditions. I demand an occasional day off. I demand a higher wage, or I'm walking. Gone. Fired. That's the way it is in the system. But with economies of scale, think about it, it works for workers too. Alone, you have no competitive advantage. You can't compete. You can't compete for a good contract. You're one person. But if everybody goes together who works there, all 1,000 employees, and say, we demand better conditions. We demand crazy things like a weekend. Where do you think weekends came from? Labor unions. We demand vacation. We demand higher wages. Companies didn't give them to them. Workers had to fight for them because companies won't give them because that's a cost. We demand this, or what do we all do together? What do we call that when they all walk out together? A strike. And so now, you lose one employee and keep producing. You lose them all. So the labor has only one thing. That's their labor, and that's economies of scale. Alone, a worker has no power. In a huge group, they have power. Just like in competition for business. The bigger the company has a competitive advantage over the smaller. And one more thing. Has anyone worked in a place, I know I've mentioned this before, like we have W-2 and work with other workers, and formal work environment out there, as people have had those. And I've worked at places like this. And I remember being told this. I've had a couple jobs where union, a couple not. And I remember being told by my boss, all right, you're a great worker. You're a great worker. And I'm going to pay you a little extra because you're doing a really good job. Don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody what you're making because you'll make them all jealous. Because you're the best. You keep that secret. Don't tell anybody. You're being in big trouble. And then what do they do to the next person? You're the best worker I've ever had. You work so hard. I'm going to pay you a little extra. Don't tell anybody. I'm sure they're told not to.
I know, but like I don't understand why people like I don't think I'm able to meet some of the people that there. And I know they make more than me.
Yeah. I'm sure they've been told not to. And they're thinking, they're thinking what I just told you. When in reality, that's a great way to do what? Kind of keep everyone low. Yeah, that's what it does. That's actually illegal, but companies do that all the time. To say to tell you not to tell other people.
There's an Adam Ruins
Hmm?
Everything. Adam Ruins. Have you ever seen Adam Ruins Everything? It's on True TV. It's about like stupid. It's about like stupid myths and stuff.
Oh.
Like there was one about how stupid funeral homes are.
Well, not the time for funeral homes.
Well, I mean, like about like
Oh,
a mix, and they have one on this, and it's like, tell your coworkers how much you make, because you might be making the least out of all of them.
Yeah, or you might all realize we're all being cheated.
Yeah, pretty much.
And so that is the element about labor unions. And so that was the key thing. Alone, you have no power. As a group, you have power. As a group. And what do they want? Okay, they don't want to strike and not work. Obviously, they have to feed their family. So, how about they put food on their family? President George W. Bush said that. We all want to put food on our family. He also said, is our children educated? Next, what they want is a collective bargaining agreement. Collective bargaining. And that is a contract for all workers. So the idea is we all will be guaranteed a wage, all guaranteed. The big thing is, it's working conditions. A lot of times will be like guaranteed a break, maybe a day off, occasional vacation. You know, things now would be, you know, things like healthcare and things like that. We're all, because labor unions collectively bargain for this. And I'm on a collective bargaining agreement. I'm in a union, the Health and Education Association, and the union negotiates one for all teachers. And so we're all on a pay scale based on education, and a little bit based on education, we get a little bit more, that kind of thing. And the thing about collective bargaining agreements and why companies are going to fight unions so hard, if you get an area where there's a lot of union activity, I mean, just think of it this way. If you have a few companies there and one of them starts a union and the workers there get higher wages, maybe they get a couple days off. The other ones or demand a union there. And if those companies don't want a union, what's the only way to make sure they don't get a union? Give them a little bit higher wage. As long as they keep control, higher wage, a little bit more benefits, so they don't have an incentive to start a union. Unions, high union activity raises all wages around. You catch that, that's why I said, the more collective bargaining agreements that employees have, higher wages become. But you can imagine why employers don't like that. That is a cost. I mean, there's a give and take here, yeah.
Oh, no, you start a union, so we're going to pay you more. And then as soon as they pay us more and give us more benefits, like, okay, now let's start a union.
Wouldn't the
Are all teachers a part of that?
Yes, every teacher is.
Is that like as part of your contract you sign on to be a part of the union?
Yeah, what happens is as long as you have over 50% of the teachers vote for a union, then the union represents everybody. You're all in it. And I got a few coworkers who think, oh, if I wasn't in a union, I'd get paid more because I'm so great. And I think, no, it doesn't work that way. They don't understand how wages work. Everybody wants to believe that they're special. The only special people in here are the people in this classroom.
so
I've never told that to other classes either. So, only keep it secret.
yeah. So with the collective bargaining and then the higher wages, wouldn't that then raise the prices?
Oh, sure, there could be potential. Yeah, but prices aren't. But remember, prices are set by the market too. So it might or might not. There's a chance it could, but remember, these are different markets. The labor market is different than that. It could, but doesn't mean it will. Because if the rug isn't there, it'd be someplace else. Okay. And in Massachusetts, their state Supreme Court in Commonwealth versus Hunt ruled that labor unions could form. And you think, who cares about Massachusetts? How does that affect other states? Yeah.
And a lot of paper, like corporation applications will go like, if you live in Massachusetts or Maine or California, you have certain rights that don't apply to these. So,
Every state has different rights.
I know, but this isn't.
But that's actually true. Montana actually has a lot more worker rights than the state union.
So we have this.
A lot more worker rights.
So we have this.
We used to have really strong unions, not anymore, but used to have really strong.
Well, I mean, the strongest ones in or the strongest rights.
Yeah, for workers. Yeah.
I watched a video on talking about union breakers.
Scabs.
Yeah, attach the.
We'll talk more about it. Massachusetts, that's where the textile industry began. And so it makes sense that'd be the first place where there'd be like an attempt by companies to get rid of unions. That's why this court case is important. And so, and we'll talk more about it. The United States should have an incredibly violent union past. Probably the most violent in the world. They called it the carnivals of violence by the end of the 19th century.
I heard about there were some areas where people they were together alive, like a canyon, and they ambushed them, like on top of the on top of the canyon and shot
And we'll talk a little bit about that. Yeah. Oh yeah, you would not believe. Employers would hire thugs, sometimes arm them with, by 1880, arm them with machine guns to shoot and mow down strikers. And government would be very anti-union and use the power of the police to break up labor unions. In fact, it wasn't until Teddy Roosevelt that there was a president that was not completely opposed to labor unions. And we have union activities really low in the United States, part of the reason why wages have been stagnant or dropping. But, like, for example, in your lifetime, President George W. Bush was very anti-union. President Obama was ambivalent. And President Trump is violently anti-union. Violent. So, a couple more things in really quick. The early union movement, they actually had a political party for labor unions. It was out of the Democratic Party. Local vocals were Democrats who wanted to be more of a labor party. But slavery would blow it up. They actually became really popular in the late 1830s. So these slavery was so divisive. The party system fell apart, just about. And yeah, isn't that a great name, Local Focos? I so wish we had a Local Focal party today, just so we could say Local Focal. I would argue that would be a great name just for that reason. And the other problem is, what are unions fighting for? I mean, really, that's a big issue. Are they going to have huge, broad goals for society, or just narrow? So we're going to have, do we want to fight the wage system? Something about changing capitalism or really toning it down? Or are we going to have, because I don't know why I did this, or just better wages and conditions? Are we going to change the system to make it more equal to their point of view, or just a bigger piece of the pie? And let me add this. If you're a business owner, which one's a bigger threat? What would survive? In the 20th century, finally that would be the goal of unions. Much narrower, much more moderate. Every once in a while there'd be a radical union. There was a really radical union called the Wobblies, the International Workers of the World. They were big in Butte. Big in Butte. America. We'll talk about them a little bit later on. Up until through World War I. That's back when we used to have 120,000 people.
Okay, I was about to say, wait, Utes had the international.
It was a different world back then. That's why Butte's like a big ghost town today. But I like Butte.
It's
interesting.
weird.
Okay,
I can always leave, right?
This
That's a
one
really
time,
nice.
Now I just broadcast that. Okay, another idea that's going to come out of this will be socialism. Socialism, it ties into Jacksonian economics, even though it's much more radical, but this is a reaction to the Industrial Revolution. Socialism, and I'll explain the pictures in just a second. Who's that? That's Marx.
Yeah, probably.
And the goal of socialism, and this goes back before the Industrial Revolution, a classless society where life would be much more equal. Not total equal, not everyone the same, but just alleviate the differences between the upper and lower class. For example, in Britain, in the 18th and 17th century, they called their socialist levelers. You know, level the classes. So it's not everyone the same, just equalize the difference. But what made this so different was, some even started like utopian societies called communes, where everyone shared what communists. Communists are socialists. So with that, capital would change everything. Once you have machines, the gap, well, actually two things happen. The gap between the rich and the poor got bigger right away. Whoever had the capital gets the profit. They also take the risk. I mean, there's a lot of give and take here. But there's something else. Before, people were spread out as farmers. What did this do?
Centralized.
They came into cities. And now, many of these socialists are thinking this is the ideal time to create this classless society. but capital is the key. So what it means is this. The ideal of socialism would be the workers have more control over, means of production means, that's another word for? I heard someone whisper, what? Yeah, capital. I heard it.
I was like,
What is it? But who controls the capital? Does that just mean stronger labor unions, or does that mean taking the capitalists out and shooting them? No, I'm serious. We have different points of view. Or maybe some more government regulation, or maybe even government take over the factories for the workers. You're gonna have all kinds of different, more moderate socialists who want like stronger labor unions and more control to keep the classes from getting too big, to government takeover, to shoot the capitalists and we take over everything, and the most radical of the socialists, who want to blow the whole thing up and replace it with perfect socialism. Anarchists. Anarchists do not want anarchy. They want to blow up the system and replace it with perfect socialism. And if an anarchist, someone says they're an anarchist and they just want to destroy everything, they're a lunatic and run away. In fact, that's actually good advice. See, I'm full of good advice. I am your friend. So, before we get to those things, we have to get to that. A lot of this economic philosophy will come out in Karl Marx, he actually wrote it with Frederick Engels, a capitalist, called the Communist Manifesto. And 49's a big year because there are revolutions all across Europe, and so it kind of fit in. He laid out much of the economic theory. Now, we're going to come back to this. I'm introducing it here, but I think some of you probably know this whole communism thing was a big deal in the 20th century. And things have changed. When I was your age, I mean, the Cold War was going on. And it was, you know, what's it, 1942? No, 52. 52 when I was your age. And Cold War is going on. To call someone a communist or a socialist, that was a major insult. And now people's opinions of socialism have changed radically, especially younger people, which is really fascinating to watch. It really is interesting. Now the majority of younger people actually favor socialism. Wow, this is a totally different world than I grew up in. I'll let you decide to make a value judgment on that. But he laid out the economic idea, and Karl Marx was a brilliant economist. His prescription's a little fantasy land, which I'll talk more about later. You know, it's kind of like everything, we'll get rid of everything and then utopia. Okay. But the actual arguments about what he saw as the flaws in capitalism would be spot on. But he would say there'd be proof that capitalism was horrible. That would be, you know, but it was amazing. We'll get to it. We're going to get to some, but I'm just introducing it here. And lastly, no group is more divided than groups of socialists, because they all think they have the ideas. Those more moderate socialists, they're despised by the communists, and everybody's scared to death of the anarchists. I'll tell you why when we get to the end of the 1890s. An anarchist shot the American president, blew up his czar, literally. This is a cartoon about socialism, and here we have workers on the bottom holding everybody up. So here they are holding up here the capitalists getting rich, then the army putting down labor unions, church convincing people to accept the system because you'll go to heaven. We fool you. It's we feed you, we work for you, we eat for you, we shoot at you, we fool you, we rule you. That's not a very subtle cartoon, but it's a pretty good one to show at least an attitude. Yeah.
It's the very, very top.
Oh, capitalism. And it's a bag of money.
I thought they wanted classless.
No, this is a socialist cartoon showing what the system they have now, but they want to replace this with a classless society.
This is
Yeah, anti-capitalism. And what we're coming to is, okay, we have the more rats, we have all these different ideas spiraling around, but we have to get to this. What does this affect then regular people and the decisions they make for government, laws and rules? The United States is not, or was not going to become a socialist country quite yet. We would develop some. By the way, what is a socialist country today? No. China calls themselves communists, but they're just an oligarchy.
They're nice.
Oligarchies controlled by one small group of elite.
a couple European countries.
Yeah, pretty much Western Europe except for Britain. Sweden, Norwegians, Danes, Icelanders, French, Germans.
Switzerland?
But they're so
What about
racist.
Swiss?
Well, part of the problem is there's such a homogeneous society. You see that a lot in homogeneous societies. Well, let me get to this real quick. Right here, workers looked at capitalism, what's being created, and they said, this is totally unfair. We have no choice in the system. We must work to survive. Yet now we have no power in the workplace. We work for horrible wages. I don't know why I'm pointing at that, but I'm pointing at nothing. I'm just going like this. If we quit, we starve. We can't just, I don't like this job because we need to feed our family. We have no control of our workplace. We're not free people anymore. What are we? And this is where you get those opposed to capitalism called it just generically wage slavery. They feared capitalism. They felt the system was rigged. And early on, at least, they became the basis of that Democratic Party. Slavery is going to blow the whole thing up. And this is on a treadmill. This is from 1890. And the capitalists, they're trying to work hard to get that money through obedience and patience. They're telling you. They keep working harder and harder, and what happens to them?
They go nowhere. The best thing.
Now, there are other people who said, no, wait a second. Capitalism is a good thing. Look at this dynamic economy. Look at all the creations, the innovations we have. You know, if you don't like your job, what can you do? Get a better job, or maybe someday you could become the capitalist. We're not slaves. We're free labor. And free labor became the pro-capitalist idea. Free labor is not labor for free. It means it's the workers are free to make their own decisions. You got the sketch? I'll give you time to give your book open.
Yeah, I got it.
It was two more things. I don't work clairvoyant. I love clairvoyant people. You know what clairvoyant is? See the future.
So the people who work for this.
Or maybe they can become the boss. And they trusted, they thought the system was good. It's not rigged. And they became the Whigs. And you see this kind of go back and forth, who trusts the system, who doesn't trust the system. This is the worker as kind of like the king of all. It's a little more complex than that. And just so you know, the magazine was called Puck, so be careful.
Yeah, I was scared for a second.
That was the name of the magazine from 1890.
Oh,
Oh, it does.
That's what I call a preemptive strike. And this will become the basis of the Democrats and the Whigs. Yeah. Until slavery blew everything up. By the way, have you ever heard politicians called left or right?
Yeah.
You know where that comes from?
But it didn't say.
It's the French Revolution. And when they did the General Assembly, those who wanted more rights for people, including crazy people who wanted rights for both equal rights for men and women and equal civil rights, they sat on the left side of the assembly. On the right, who wanted a monarchy or just rights for a few, they sat on the right. It's socialism, left or right? It's left. What's the furthest right line?
Monarchy.
Fascist.
Totalitarian dictatorship.
Way back home in Michigan, and it tastes like that when I'm
I can't remember. I really took me something to keep without knowing all the things. But I think I put the date Oh, thank you. I don't want to get a copyright violation. That actually was really funny.